The Rabbi's Talmud class is sponsored by David Suster Trust, Ellen and George Sheeran, Nora and Jack Skiba, in memory of Harold Grill. Rabbi,
Thank you
take
so
it away.
much. Welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining, for those who are here and for those who will be watching afterwards. We will talk tonight about the different steps of the mourning process, and we will understand where do they come from, where do we learn that we should be respecting those period of time, and the most important traditions associated to each period. And I use the word tradition because most of them are not law, are not halacha, are just customs. And they vary a lot from place to place, from congregation to congregation. And I will, at the end, maybe give you some curiosities about the differences between Brazil and here. Because some of the traditions that we used to practice in Brazil, you don't practice here, and vice versa. And some of the traditions that were very important in Brazil, here, not so much. And also the opposite. Some traditions here are very, very central, and there they were not. So we can see that it really changes from congregation to congregation, from place to place, from tradition to tradition, and it doesn't necessarily mean one is right and the other is wrong, it's just different traditions. But there is a thread that we can see and recognize that connect those different traditions. So let's start reading here together. And if you have questions, please feel free to ask, to participate, to talk, because this is meant to be an open conversation. So I called it Phases of Jewish Mourning, or Avelut Bishlavim in Hebrew. Step by step, shlav by shlav, phase by phase, how the mourning process unfolds. The structured mourning period of Aninut, this is something that you might have not heard about. So even before we start mourning, we have a period of time called Aninut. Aninut is the period since you hear about someone's death and the funeral. Because we don't talk about mourning before the funeral. Before the funeral, there is no mourning. So the situation of the mourners to be until the funeral is called aninut. The person is onen. Onen is the person who is about to be a mourner, who is not a mourner yet. And we will see that there are specific halachot concerning the person who has lost someone, but the funeral did not happen yet. Then comes the Shiva. We are very familiar with the idea of the 7 days. How to count the 7 days sometimes can get tricky, can get complicated, in particular if you have a holiday in the middle of the counting. So we can get into details in a while, but if you have Pesach, Shavuot, Sukkot, while you are counting the 7 days, it interrupts the counting. So the Shiva period, the 7 days, initial 7 days of mourning, sometimes takes 2 days, or 3 days, or 1 day, or a few hours, depending on the holidays. The same thing with regard to Shloshim. The Shloshim, the period of 30 days, sometimes will be a period of 10, 15, 20, 25, depending on what is going on with the Jewish calendar. Shabbat does not interrupt mourning, because then it would be impossible to do a full period of 1 week, let alone the 30 days, but it suspends mourning. So during Shabbat, the mourners are not in mourning, and after Shabbat, they are in mourning again. So, in particular, the public expressions of mourning are suspended during Shabbat. The private manifestations can be observed, but the public expressions are suspended, meaning we act publicly as if we were not in mourning during Shabbat. And then we get back to our mourning. One simple example, we can change our clothes on Shabbat. So we are supposed to stay with the torn garments, with the torn clothes during the entire week. But on Shabbat, we are allowed to change in honor of Shabbat, and then we get back to our torn clothes.
But you have to say Kaddish, right?
Yes, Kaddish is one thing that you keep on saying during the entire 11 months, first 11 months, for father and mother only. We don't say more than 30 days of Kaddish for a spouse, for children, or for siblings. For children, siblings, and spouse, we say 30 days only, and for parents, a full 11 days. And the months. Thank you. And the idea behind is because we have one father only, and we have one mother only. We might have more than one child. We might have one more than a spouse. We might have more than a sibling. But father, it's only one, and mother, it's only one. So this is the reason why for them, we observe the full mourning process, meaning the full 11 months for Kaddish and 12 months of mourning. Yes.
I have a question. I thought that you get to choose after the 30 days if you wanted to continue the 11 months. So like when my parents died, we had the choice of, the 30 days of, no parties, no music, no nothing. But at the funeral, we had to say if we're going to keep only 30 days or the full 11 months.
For parents?
For my parents.
Yeah. I never heard about this opt-out possibility. There might be something that I'm not aware of. As far as I'm concerned, we should be observing the full 11 months of Kaddish for parents, for father or mother. It's a very difficult thing to do. Very difficult thing to do. To say daily, several times a day, for 11 months, Kaddish, it requires a lot of commitment. It's really, really difficult. It means almost not traveling during that period, or making sure that everywhere you go, there will be a minyan going on. Today, there is the online possibility that opened up a whole new world of possibilities. But before the online, and for those who do not accept the online, it's not everyone that accepts the online possibility. It is really difficult, really complicated to keep saying for 11 months. So there are flexible ways to do it. So some people will say, you know what, I try to say at least once a day, which is difficult on itself, but it's less than saying Shacharit, Mincha, and Arvit. Some people will say, you know what, I try to say at least once every week. Shabbat, I say Kaddish, and then I keep the tradition for 11 months of saying at least once a week. But the original requirement, as so to speak, to say, was say every single ceremony, every single prayer for 11 months.
What about step relatives? Like you could have, you have one father or whatever who passes away, and then whether it's gets remarried. Is that you're not a mourner for that, or?
So the obligation is for siblings from the same mother and father only. If you want to obligate yourself, if you want to take to yourself the responsibility, it's totally fine. You can always go beyond, right? But the original requirement is for siblings from father and mother.
Oh, he's
But
gonna-
what if the parent has remarried? For whatever reason, whether it was if the spouse passed away or divorced, and what if the parent remarried and you have a stepfather? Is it just 30 days? Or
Or you're not a mourner?
or are you doing 11 months also?
Your stepfather is not biologically your father, right? So you are not obligated to say Kaddish to them. You can obligate yourself. You can say
So you
this
do
is
30 days and then stop.
You could do whatever you want.
right. You
Okay.
don't have the obligation for a day, even from the halachic standpoint. You can say to yourself, "This is my father, and I want to do everything, or I want to do part." You actually decide what you do, but from the halachic standpoint, you are not obligated.
What about adopted children? They're not halakhically responsible then?
The same thing, yes.
Really?
Yeah, the original halacha is for biological. I would recommend an adopted children to do it 100%, and vice versa for the parents for a child, but it's not the original requirement. There are other things that are very related to when it was all established. When a child passes before 30 days, there is no mourning whatsoever required, because it was so common that children would die very small, very young, that it would be very difficult to require every time that it happened for the families to be observing mourning. So, but today, that normally when a child is born, the child survives because we have much more resources. The recommendation is to sit Shiva, to observe mourning normally, because the reality changed. Any other questions? So let's advance a little more. So Shloshim and Yud Bet Chodesh, meaning 12 months, are rooted in biblical events and codified in rabbinic literature. Each stage reflects a halachic understanding of grief and its expression in time. This is from Moed Katan, from one of the Talmudic parts. They mourn 7 days. Mourning is not less than 3 days, and 30 days for ironing and haircuts. We will get there. Biblical precedents include Joseph mourning for his father Jacob for 7 days. So this is one of the origins of the Shiva observance. And the people mourning Aaron and Moses for 30 days. So when Aaron, the first Cohen, passes, and when Moses passes, the two brothers, 30 days of mourning were observed. So let's dive into each of the phases and see what it requires from us. First, aninut, from death until burial. So, as you know, we are supposed to organize the burial as soon as possible. So, waiting is not ideal from the moment of death until the burial. In Jerusalem, they open the cemeteries 24 hours, and burial can take place 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning, any time, except on Shabbat and holidays. But they try to make it happen as soon as possible. So if a person passes, let's say 6 in the afternoon, they will try to get organized, and the burial might take place at midnight or 1, 2, 3 in the morning. In Brazil, talking about differences, it was normally on the following day of the passing. And here in the US, people wait more, normally 2, 3, sometimes more days. And I think it has to do with the reality here that the families are more spread over. So you always have someone coming from California, and someone coming from Texas, and someone coming from Boston, and someone coming from Chicago. So it's difficult to do on the following day. In Brazil, as most of the people were from the same city, from São Paulo, it was easier to organize it for the following day. So 60% of the Jews in Brazil are in São Paulo. And normally, if someone passes in São Paulo, chances are that all of the family, the close family, are in the city. Sometimes a son is traveling, is in Europe, and then they would wait 1, 2, 3 days for the son to arrive. But normally it would be on the following day. During Aninut, the mourner is exempt from positive time-bound commandments due to preoccupation with burial responsibilities. So the mourners are supposed to be taking care of the burial. The mourners should be taking care of the burial arrangements, and they are not supposed to be preoccupied with fulfilling the mitzvot. Which kind of mitzvot? Specific time-bound, positive time-bound commandments. This is important to explain. First of all, positive is mitzvot aseh, not mitzvot lot aseh. It's not about things you are forbidden, you are required not to do. It's about things you are required to do. For instance, you are required not to kill. You are not allowed to kill while you are an onen. So the not to stay, it's just the positive mitzvah, the mitzvah that you are required to do, and are time bound, meaning they have to be accomplished during a certain time frame, like putting on tefillin, for instance. It's positive, it's not negative. It's positive, and it's time bound. You have to put on tefillin during the day. When it gets dark, you are forbidden to put on tefillin, or to say the morning Shema Israel and things like that.
What about taking care of the body? Are you supposed to be sitting with the body? Is that a positive? Is that
So,
like you? Okay. Example. My
Yes.
father passed away the night of the first Seder.
mhm.
So actually that day. So we went to the Seder and we took turns sitting in the funeral home with the body. A very interesting experience, I could say.
We hired somebody to sit with the
Well,
body.
typically you would, but because it was
Yom Tov.
Pesach and it was Yontif, there was nobody around they were all at the Seder. So is that part of the,
There is a tradition of not leaving the body unattended. And we know the origin of this tradition because the Talmud tells us it's written because of the mice. So in a time that there was no refrigerators, if you left a body unattended, animals could come. So the idea of keeping someone there is philosophical, emotional, and everything else, but is very practical also. It's to protect the body from being attacked by any animal. So today we have evolved and we have the refrigerators, and it's not dangerous for the body to be alone.
is that
But
halachic
still,
or is that?
it's not halacha,
Okay.
it's tradition,
Okay.
and still, in particular in Orthodox places, they will keep someone taking care of the body and normally reading Psalms while they are there to watch, to protect, but originally it had a very, very practical
Wasn't
reason.
there also the idea of, I don't know what the best word is, but you want to treat the body with respect,
Right.
and leaving it alone
Right.
would go against
It
that.
might be considered disrespectful, although we do not believe that the person is there. And the body is there, yes. The person,
So the physical is there,
people
but the soul
knew,
is
and
not.
yeah, the vessel is there, right? So Talmudic source, onen patur minat tefillah. So onen is exempt from the tefillah. When we say tefillah here, we are talking about Amidah specifically. It's not prayer in general. It's Amidah. Minat tefillin, from putting on tefillin, umichol mitzvot ha'amurot baTorah, and all the other mitzvot in the Torah, mitzvot aseh, positive mitzvot, time bounding. Prohibition on eating meat, on drinking. This is also a custom. This is just a tradition that before the burial, the onen is forbidden to eat meat or drink wine. So let's go to the next page and get to the Shiva, to the 7 days.
When the Talmud brings the masculine language, like in this case, were they referring only to men, or it included women as well?
So the public manifestations of Shiva were for men only, like saying Kaddish.
But
Women were not required to say Kaddish, and in some congregations they are still
But in
not.
this case of eating meat and drinking wine,
For men and women.
although the language is masculine.
Yes. I would say depend on the mitzvah and depend on the situation, but like women did not put on tefillin. So when you say you are not obligated to put on tefillin, they were talking about men particularly. But women should be saying tefillah, should be saying Amidah. And they were also exempt from saying Amidah if they were in mourning. So this is why I say it depends
When
on
you're
the
in
tefillah.
mourning, you're exempt from saying Amida?
Before the funeral.
Oh,
Only during the
When you are on onen, a future mourner,
Until the
the funeral, until the burial.
Until the
Yeah.
burial.
Until the burial. Until the
The
burial.
relatives not feeling.
Yes. So Shiva, 7 days after burial. Biblical origin. Joseph observed 7 days of mourning for Jacob. and this is the biblical source. ויספדו שם מספד גדול וכבד מאוד, ויעש לאביו אבל 7 ימים. So they eulogized their eulogy, a big eulogy, very heavy and large eulogy. Vayas le'aviv, and he did for his father Avel, mourning, Shivat Yamim, of 7 days. Sitting low and staying at home. So, as you know, there is this tradition of sitting low. So this is also something that I learned here. The Shiva chairs, I've never seen them before.
They've come a long way.
In Brazil.
Yeah,
They-
yeah,
right.
yeah,
in
yeah,
Brazil,
it's like a cardboard box.
They
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
sit on the floor, or they
Above.
take the pillow of the couch off, and they sit like on the couch without
the pillow.
the pillow. They sit closer to the ground, closer to the floor. And the idea of sitting closer to the floor shows that you want to be close to the person that was buried under the dirt and under the earth. So you want to be close, and you are also down. You are also sad. So this is all an external manifestation of that idea. But we did not have the Shiva chairs in Brazil. It was just sitting lower, and this is I suppose,
You know, there
an
must-
American innovation.
There must be some ruling that says what the minimum, the maximum distance is of the chair.
I've never seen. It might be. But the idea is that you sit lower than normally, you closer to the floor than you normally, and it's usual to see people sitting on the floor.
Sephardics sit on a mattress on the floor.
Or right,
Sephardic Jews in New York.
okay. So
Well, why can't you wear shoes? Why could you only wear socks when you're in mourning?
So again, the idea is to be close to the floor. As you sit closer to the floor, you want to feel the floor. You take off your shoes. Shoes were also a symbol of comfort, right? A symbol of comfort. So you take off your comfort in order to be feeling the floor and feeling the sorrow and the pain and the grief. Yes. The torn garment. So this is something that I learned here also. I've never seen the ribbon before I got here. In Brazil, they would tear the actual short.
Right.
And here they made it a little bit like fancier. We
Don't ruin your clothes.
don't ruin your
Right,
clothes.
Right.
Oh, it could be the depression mentality that you
Yeah,
shouldn't
it
waste.
depends.
But
The
they
Orthodox
Yes, it
will
depends
rip
who it
their
is.
They
clothes.
still cut their.
They'll
Yeah.
still rip their
Short.
clothes.
Yeah.
Even conservative in Brooklyn, we still rip out.
Yes.
Yes.
Rip a collar or
Yeah.
something.
Mhm.
So the
Okay.
first time I performed, I officiated here, the funeral director asked, "How many ribbons?"
Oh, you didn't know what he was talking about, did you?
I didn't know what they are talking about. I had no idea.
Mhm.
First, I didn't know the word ribbon. And then when I learned what it was, I didn't know what it was for.
You've come a long way.
Yes.
I wonder about like other countries, like you talk about Brazil. I wonder if other countries,
I am
any
sure they all have
that-
their own
They
traditions.
probably rip their clothes.
Yeah.
The other day, I did a Persian funeral, and at some point, they asked me, "Rabbi, can we already throw the water?" I said, "I suppose." Which
And the water
and they,
outside the house.
so rose water.
Rose water.
Ah,
They at some point they throw like They do
Sprinkle the body or
sprinkle the
grave?
casket, the
Uh,
grave with rose water. I had no
I
idea,
never saw
but
that.
it's a
Sounds
Persian
Indian.
tradition
Persian too, they do use a lot of rose water and
for cooking.
yes, but I guess it also has other.
Yes. So there are plenty of specific traditions. I can speak more about Brazil and here
Mm.
because I've never been a rabbi elsewhere. I know a little bit about Israel. I've done some funerals with my tutor while I was studying my internship. So I saw some funerals there. As you know, there are no caskets.
So they're just wrapping the body.
They wrap, yes, in a
Shroud.
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 Yeah.
And this is it. Yes.
A sheet.
Yes. A sheet. Yes.
Shrouds off.
Shrouds. Yeah, shrouds are specific. In Hebrew, it's tachrichim. Tachrichim. It's the funeral shrouds. So garments are torn at the funeral or upon hearing of death. It does not need to be in the funeral, but once the person learns about the death, the person themselves can tear their clothes and say the bracha Baruch Dayan Emet. When you tear your shirt or your ribbon, you say a specific blessing. Blessed is the judge of truth. Baruch Dayan Haemet is the blessing that we are supposed to say.
When we send out a lot of notices, that's the language we use. Baruch Dayan Haemet.
Right. Baruch
Yeah.
Dayan Haemet is
Yes.
the wording that we normally use for announcing that someone
Yes. Mhm.
has passed.
Especially
You're
like
quoting things
women's
from the
league.
Talmud. Typically, you said there would always be 20 different opinions in the Talmud. Which
Right.
one is being quoted here? The dominant opinion or
The,
the majority opinion?
the opinion that prevailed
But
in
not all the
terms
others
of
that-
practice.
But not all the others that accompany.
No, never. There always debate and conversation and
We have no
discussion,
paper.
but some traditions prevailed. So we put on tefillin on our arm, on our forehead. There were plenty of opinions, some including some said that tefillin is not some physical symbol, but just the idea of committing ourselves to the mitzvot. But at some point, some opinion prevailed over the other opinions. And those are the ones I'm bringing here, the ones that became halacha, that became law. Not every opinion in Talmud became law. There was a rabbi that thought that eating chicken with cheese was fine.
Oh, because it's a,
It's not forbidden in the Torah.
right, because it says that you can't eat cow and
Right.
there's milk and there's no milk for chicken.
Right.
So
But
if I
that
mix
opinion,
fish and cheese together,
and
they still
and
don't.
some don't even eat fish with cheese. Right. No laundered clothing or bathing during the first days, the 7 days. No greetings or Torah study. We normally don't call the person up to an aliyah. It's part of this. So this is, as you know, the stricter period of time, the most severe phase of mourning. Customs vary. We didn't mention like covering the mirrors, for
mirrors,
instance, but it's a very well spread tradition. Why do we cover the mirror? Do you know?
Vanity. So
You
this
don't-
way you don't.
To avoid vanity. Okay.
It's supposed to only be of the
Right, you don't have to
dead
really worry about how you look.
Right.
You don't want to be worried about how you look. Are there other explanations?
I thought that something about the soul.
The soul, there's some spiritual belief that the soul is still in the house, and we don't want the soul to be surprised by looking at the mirror and realizing they don't have a body anymore. So
That's
this
out
is
there.
a mystical explanation,
Yes.
but there is a more practical one. We are not supposed to pray in front of mirror. And we pray during Shiva inside the Shiva house, inside the Shiva home. We should not be praying in front of mirrors. It would be considered idolatry, praying, looking at ourselves or looking at other
Is
people.
that why they
that-
don't like Zoom?
So this is a question. You are not supposed to be praying looking at the TV. I know we have the TV at the corner there just to check on and see if people are following and everything is right. But we are not supposed to be praying and looking at
And
other
that's
people.
for all time.
Correct.
In general, yes. And we are not supposed to have mirrors in the synagogue.
Which we don't except for the ladies' room.
When Zoom came up because of the pandemic, there were several concerns, and this was one of them. On top of questions if we should consider a minyan of people that are not physically in the same room, and things with regard to Shabbat and technology, and praying in front of a screen. This is also a question. Instead of looking at Aron HaKodesh, at the synagogue, you actually look at the Shaliach Tzibur. This is one of the reasons that, at least in traditional, in more orthodox places, the Shaliach Tzibur gives his back to the congregation. They are not looking at him, you are looking at his back.
Mhm.
Let's advance a little more. We
Yes,
have
I'm keeping an eye. I'm not being rude. I'm just keeping an eye because of
because we have tefillah, minyan, yeah, and I will excuse myself. I will not stay for minyan. We have a family dinner tonight because tomorrow
Well,
is someone's
Special day.
birthday.
Yeah, special day tomorrow.
Yes. 30. So the 30 days period. Biblical origin, as we said before, Moses and Aaron, people observed the 30 days for both Moses and Aaron, and the verses are here. No haircuts or shaving. So the prohibition of cutting, having the hair cut and shaving stays during the entire 30 days. It's until the end of Shloshim. So we are not supposed to shave not only for 7 days, but for 30 days. We're not supposed to have our hair cut for the entire 30 days. And no attending festive events during the 30 days, and gradual return to work. It is symbolized by walking around the block after Shiva, right? When Shiva ends, we are supposed, or there's a tradition that we go around our block, and the idea is that we are gradually resuming our life and our commitment. So this is with regard to the 30 days.
The attending festivals, if a parent dies, do you have to not attend for 11 months?
What's the question again?
Let's say
If
you
there's a
have
wedding
if
or
there's a
something.
Okay. So
if it's a parent that passes, do you have to abstain? from-
Well, are you supposed to abstain?
you are supposed to abstain for a year, but we understand, and Judaism understands that in some cases your presence there is very important.
You don't have
and
to dance.
You don't have to dance, right? You can go and not to dance. And what happens if it's your family's event and you are running the event? So there are a few ways to diminish a little bit your happiness. So I saw very creative ways when I was in Brazil. There were families that were in mourning and they had a wedding, coming up. So they decided to keep the music, But instead of doing 8 musicians on the stage, they cut it to 4. Or instead of doing 3 courses during the meal, they did 1 course only, and things like that. So the party that was already planned had to be
Toned down.
yes.
So would the parents who are having the wedding abstain from like a hora?
It's so
Or is
personal.
no,
It's
or is
so
that,
personal,
or is that
right?
a personal? I was gonna say, is that a
Uh,
personal decision that you make?
we it's a personal decision. It's a personal decision. Yeah. And I had to talk to couples and to families and to people that were in this situation. And I said to them, at the end of the day, you will make the decision. And some of them said to me, you know what? My deceased father would
Mhm.
hate for me not to dance,
Right.
not to be happy, not to celebrate this moment. So I will dance, and I will dance for him on his memory, on her memory. So it and I would never say no. You shouldn't. So it in the end of the day, it's very, very, very personal. So if it's a party that you are not personally involved, I would say avoid it or go there, but not necessarily dance. But if it's your party and you might regret not celebrating it properly, it becomes a very, very, very personal issue. Yes.
So after 7 days, you get up and you walk around the block
Yeah.
to resume.
You get back to work,
Right.
right?
But-
You get back.
But then the next time is at the end of the next 11 months that you do anything? Is there something at the end of the 11 months that you do something?
You are talking about the father and mother.
Yes.
Okay, so there is the walk around the block after the week. After the Shloshim in Brazil, we would go back to the cemetery,
Okay.
and there would be a
that's a good
ceremony
idea.
there after Shloshim. And you know what we would do? And I haven't seen it here. They would give a small piece of the shroud to the family. On the day of the burial, the Chevra Kadisha, the funeral home, will cut a piece of the shroud off and give it to the family. And the family would keep it for a month, and they would go back to the cemetery and to bury the small piece of cloth with the person in the same place as a way to say we are giving one step further in accepting the loss. It's one more step of acceptance of that loss. But I haven't seen it here.
No, I've never heard of it.
Is that kind of like at the end of the year, having an unveiling?
This is the Shloshim. And at the end of the year, we would do the unveiling, the Matzeva. Yeah. But Chabad, for instance, does the unveiling after 30 days.
Okay.
You don't have to wait for the year. You can.
Well, no,
You don't have to
right.
wait. You
Right.
don't have to wait. You don't have to wait.
It's
When
ju-
people ask me, I recommend them to wait just because I think that it's difficult for the person to remember that he or she is still in mourning when they have the unveiling already done. There is a feeling that I'm done, right? And the unveiling is something very, very physical, right? We put a stone, and it's like closing a chapter, closing an issue, going to the next step. So I normally recommend the unveiling to be after a year, but you don't have to. I agree.
So you can do
We've
that.
waited.
After the 30th,
We waited for the
day.
11 months, but
So Yud Bet Chodesh, 12 months. The last part we will read together, and we can start concluding. Biblical basis for extended mourning. The Torah implies of a longer grief process through extended mourning narratives. Extended mourning for parents. Mourning customs for a parent continue for 12 months. And this is the halachic source. And the most important thing is the Kaddish. So why do we stop saying Kaddish on the 11th month and we don't keep on saying for 12?
Because you're saying Kaddish for him, for your parent, for whomever to rise up and to like kind of erase their sins, and you can't fathom that somebody would need all 12 months being purgatory.
Right,
That's, that
right,
a Hitler would be all 12 months in purgatory.
right,
So we stop after 11 to
Right.
say that, to make sure that they're out, but that they could not be that
So
horrible.
saying Kaddish for 12 months would imply that we consider the person to be a wicked person, a bad person. It's written in the Talmud, Mishpat Reshaim Yud Bet Chodesh. The sentence of a bad person is 12 months. So the worst person will spend in the purgatory 12 months. So you show your belief that the person is not the worst possible person by saying less than 12, meaning 11. Is a way to say the person I am saying Kaddish for may have committed mistakes, done bad things, as everyone does, but not to be considered the worst, the most evil person. So the idea is to show confidence and trust in the person that passed, that the person might need your prayers, but it does not need all the way until the end. The 12 months is considered to be all the way until the everything, the complete process of atonement that soul would require. And we want to show that we believe that the person was not that bad. Question is when you know that the person was bad.
Oh my God.
What do you do?
You go-
I would say
Yeah.
say 11 months publicly and
Okay, yeah,
1
right.
month
Don't let people know that.
privately.
Well, who are you gonna judge? Yeah.
Yeah. Who are you to judge? Right. Who are you to judge? And we know it can always get worse. Question,
I have
comments?
a question. One of the earlier comments said mourning is not less than 3 days. Under what circumstances could it be 3 days?
Holiday.
This is on the first day, the first day.
Look, my mother died Erev Yom Kippur. So we couldn't sit on Yom Kippur.
Yeah, but you
And
can
it went
say
down.
afterwards.
No.
No, that day gets erased.
No, it's over. If you start mourning process,
But then here it says it not less than 3.
yeah, here I understand here as being in a situation that you cannot observe because you have a very big professional commitment or a travel that you must make. So after the third day, you have at least
So it's not the
observed
case
the
that she was
minimum.
talking-
No, it's not the case she's talking about, because the case she's talking about can be one day only and can be a few hours.
Well, that's how, when my mother died, she died a day and a half before Yom Kippur.
Okay,
So so Erev Yom Kippur, we buried her, we sat 4 hours, we got up, we were done.
so the
Yeah.
Shiva here was 4 hours, because after Yom Kippur, you start counting Shloshim, that was again interrupted by Sukkot.
But wait a minute.
And if someone passes during Chol HaMoed, the Shiva does not start until after the
That's
last
what happened
days
with us.
of
Yeah.
of
We
of
buried
the
herself.
funeral
We
of the
buried herself.
festival. No, there is Shiva. If the person passes during Chol HaMoed, you wait to start Shiva after the 8th day of Sukkot. This is what happened with your, yes. So you can have the funeral during Holomoid, You can have funeral during Chol Hamoed, but you don't start Shiva until after the last day of the holiday, which is a very strange
Weird.
situation because you come back from the cemetery and you are not sitting Shiva yet. You wait a few days
And you're
to
observing out.
start,
Yeah.
Right.
and you observe holiday somehow. Yes, yes, can get, and then you have Adar Aleph and Adar Beit situation.
Oh,
Oh,
no.
with
Yeah.
Adar, right? We spoke about that.
The leap
last year.
year situation. So it can get tricky, you know. Jews like to complicate things.
Uh, one could claim that they made up all these things so that the sages and the rabbis
Had something to talk
had
about.
something to talk about.
Right, they
and
never
then
get bored.
elevate themselves.
One
wait,
quick
so what do you-
question, should we set up in here for Minyan or in the small sanctuary? Can you set us up here?
I
I could set
I
us, I
I
could set us
will
up in there.
Okay.
I would say there just because
Okay.
I have to leave.
No, I know, I want you
Okay.
to leave
What-
and
what-
have a
what-
happy
what-
birthday.
What happens if it's on a leap year and it's that second month?
So if it's on a leap year and the person passes on Adar Bet,
Yes.
so everything will be observed on Adar, on the only Adar.
Okay.
And if the person passes on the only Adar, and 1 year after it's Adar Bet, the person waits one additional month because Adar Bet is the Adar Aleph is the
The
extra
extra one,
Adar.
right.
The extra Adar is
Okay.
always the Aleph.
Okay.
So yes, it's complicated.
All right,
Don't worry,
we-
It depends on what is going on in the year that the person passes,
You're gonna
and
stay
then
for me?
each year
No, I have to,
thereafter.
leaving early tomorrow, full day in the city.
anyway, have a happy birthday and
Yes, we
thank
should.
you for
Thank
this.
you. No,
And we're
my,
gonna-
my
we're gonna
pleasure.
go into
And
the
and this
small
Shabbat morning, I will bring some information about Pesach. How should we observe Pesach in a special year like this when Pesach comes right after Shabbat? Let's say Shabbat, Saturday night,
Right,
Pesach will start. So how does it impact Shabbat, and how does it impact searching for chametz, burning chametz, the fast of firstborn, and everything else?